welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for part two of our live talk series on trans education and inclusion within the live music industry with the wonderful Saskhia Menendez. Welcome back to those season live talks attendees, and hello to anyone who hasn't joined us before. My name's Gabby. I'm the head of partnerships at Live. And for those who don't know what Live is, we're the voice of the UK's live music sector. We're a federation of 16 live music industry associations representing thousands of businesses, artists, and backstage workers, all working towards a better future for our industry, whether that's around ED&I, well-being, sustainability, touring, venues, festivals, the list goes on. So my pronouns are she, her. I'm a white female with brown eyes, blondish tied back hair, and I'm wearing a khaki shirt. Our Live Talks program is a series of free online workshops and talks which focus on equality, diversity, inclusion, sustainability, and well-being, and are all aimed at making the UK live music sector a more inclusive and positive place to work. I just wanted to take this opportunity to give a shout out to the programme's committed partners. We're supported by the likes of Live Nation, AEG, Killy, SJM, Sirius, and Utilita Arena in Birmingham, who make all these sessions free to access for everybody. And it's worth noting that these are all available to watch back via our archive on the Live website. Just before I hand over to Saskia, I just need to go through a really quick bit of housekeeping. Please note we are recording today's session to share online for those unable to join. If you would rather remain anonymous, please feel free to keep your camera turned off and change your Zoom name to anonymous, but we always appreciate everyone putting their cameras on and being as engaged as possible. Make sure your mic's muted throughout to avoid interference. And if we have some time left at the end, we'll open the floor up to questions, but also feel free to put questions in the chat as the session goes on, and we'll get to them at the end. All resources that Saskia shares throughout the presentation will be made available via the website. So I encourage everyone to make use of those and share them with colleagues or friends who aren't here today. Thank you so much, and over to you, Saskia.
Thank you so much, Gabby, and thanks to everybody at Live, that's John, Grace, and yourself, for putting on this today and for allowing people to learn more on trans education and inclusion in the music industry. My name is Saskhia Menendez. I'm an equality and diversity ambassador, a researcher, a mentor, and a social change activist. I've been doing music now for over 10 years. I'm a trans woman, I'm a post-op trans woman, so I've been transitioning for over 14 years. I'm a parent to 2 children and also a grandparent. And yeah, I'm here to help educate and to help people understand some of the issues and barriers that trans and non-binary people face when accessing the music and entertainment industries. So thank you all for coming along today, for learning more and taking time out of your busy schedule. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you very much. So in today's agenda, we're going to look at what it is to be transgender and what transgender actually means. Where we're at in the UK. So obviously we've diverged away from being part of the European Union, and they have different rights to us. So we've now diverged from that. And we also need to figure out, okay, so where do we fit in the world and where are our rights and how do they differ to other peoples across the globe? We're also going to look at trans rights and the Trans Rights Index and the Trans Rights Map, which maps out places across the country, not just this country, but across Europe and 5 countries in South Asia. And it maps out the kind of rights that people have in those different countries. I thought it's also really important to cover this because it involves touring, rights, you know, what kind of access people might have when traveling to different countries and what their rights might be. I'm also going to touch on community and collaboration, which I think is extremely, extremely important because I think the trans community needs to do more work on collaborations with other disadvantaged and underrepresented groups. But I also need to try and make sure that other underrepresented groups and disadvantaged communities are able to collaborate with us as a trans community and feel safe and included. And I'm also going to open the floor at the end in the last 10 minutes for myself and my friend Josh that's on the call today. Hi, Josh, nice to see you. Who's a trans guy who's going to share some of his experiences with us because as a trans woman, you know, I have different issues to what a trans man might face. Some of them are similar. But again, some of those issues are different. So I thought it'd be great to bring Josh up at the end. So if you've got any questions, you're not just getting questions from me or from my personal experiences, but also a trans guy's experiences in the music industry, because some of those issues are going to differ. So here's a transgender introduction. So what is transgender? So I've been trans now for, as I said, 15 years, and transgender individuals are people whose gender identity differs from the sex that they were assigned at birth. So that therefore means that someone who doesn't feel comfortable with their assigned gender at birth suffers from dysphoria, which therefore means they don't feel comfortable in their own body and they don't feel that their soul and their body align. So what happens is people start to feel really uncomfortable in that body and feel that they're unable to continue in that body as they are. So they go through a transition, and a lot of the time people that go through transition have a lot of different issues that you have to cover. And the main issue that people cover on this is gender identity. So a gender identity is a person's internal sense of their gender. So it may be female, it may be male, it may be both, and it may be neither. So the transgender issue is on a spectrum. So people fit on that spectrum in different ways, actually. So we have trans men, we have trans women, and we have non-binary individuals. So on the whole, mostly trans women identify as she, her, but some of them do identify as she, they. And then trans men, again, often identify as he, him, but some also identify as he, they. So not everyone that fits into that binary spectrum always identifies as being a binary. So I think that needs to also really be included in this talk today, because I think there is a lot of issues around non-binary recognition and also legal protections in this country, which I'll touch on in a little bit. So the gender identity of a person is really, really important, and it's how that person feels that they identify. So we have non-binary people who may identify as neither male or female or both, and sometimes they might not feel that they're any of them. So this is another issue that we face under the trans umbrella, is the term transgender has expanded over time. So when I started transitioning, 10, 15 years ago now, non-binary didn't actually exist at that time. So it's been a new concept that's now come up, and the government hasn't actually addressed it properly just yet. So there is some work to be done on that, and I will cover some of those issues in a minute. Gender dysphoria is also something that distresses individuals who suffer from being trans. And it means that a person whose gender identity doesn't align with the way they feel. So they feel uncomfortable, it causes anxiety, it causes depression. It makes someone feel that they're not in the right skin, they're not able to function, they're not able to participate in the ways that they would like to, and they are not seen as the way that they feel. So this is a massive issue for people that are trans, because especially trans women, I think, when we transition, there's a lot of work to be done, and it's a lot harder to be passing than it would be, say, for example, trans men. So trans men generally pass a lot easier than trans women. Trans women are more noticeable, they stand out more, and generally we have to do more surgeries in able to pass and able to fit into society and to fill those gender norms. Also recognizing that transgender individuals may also face discrimination or marginalization based on their race, ethnicity, social economic background, disability, and other identities. So talking about the non-binary issue, I just wanted to touch on this, that in September 2015, the Ministry of Justice responded to a petition calling for self-determination of legal gender, saying that they were not aware of any specific detriment experienced by non-binary people, that they were unable to be gendered legally recognised. In January 2016, the Trans Inquiry Report by the Women and Equality Select Committee called for non-binary people to be protected from discrimination under the Equalities Act, for an X-gender marker to be added to passports, and for wholesale review in the needs of gender markers to be added to passports. This did not happen, and in June 2018, the British High Court ruled against a bid for British passports to have an X marker in them. So therefore, in 2018, there was a legal case actually taken by a tribunal for someone who was not non-binary, and they found that that non-binary person was protected under the Act of Equalities Act under gender reassignment. Then that went back to the Houses of Parliament in 2023, and they've decided that actually non-binary isn't legally recognised in this country at the moment. So there is an issue on the protections of non-binary people specifically at the moment in the UK because they're not legally recognised by law. So they don't have the same rights as what a trans man or a trans woman would have under the trans umbrella, which needs to be addressed. So what are the rights of trans people in the United Kingdom? So in 2021, the UK Census, for the first time ever, collected data around trans individuals in England and Wales. Out of this survey, 262,000 people answered the question, which was 94% of the population in England and Wales aged over 16 or above. So in the survey, we found that 60% of those respondents, which was 166,000 people, identified as non-binary, and that's in England and Wales. And then out of that, there was 20%, which was 48,000, identified as a trans man, and another 20%, which was 48,000, identified as trans women. So if we look at this more closely, there's actually 3 times the amount of non-binary individuals than there are trans women in the UK. So there's a massive part of the trans community that doesn't have any legal protections. So this is something that we do need to look at and that does need to be addressed. And also that non-binary people feel included under the trans umbrella because non-binary people do suffer from dysphoria. It might not be as extreme as what a trans man or a trans woman does, but they still suffer and they need to be protected and recognised. So in 2013, the UK was at the top of the Trans Rights Index. Today, we are number 21. So when I first started the transition here in the UK in 2011, this country was the best in those 55 countries in trans rights. Unfortunately, today, I think we've now dropped even further than 21st because that was done in 2023. I think we've now dropped to 24th. So we're almost around halfway. So that's a massive drop in rights and recognitions for trans and non-binary individuals in the UK. And this has a massive impact on the people that have to live here, that go through that and are part of this community, because it's very difficult when you're navigating yourself in a world that doesn't always accept you and you're trying to find your place in employment or in the world, and not everyone understands or accepts you as a person. And I think, you know, when I first started the transition, it was a lot easier then than it is now. And I think this is a concept that a lot of people struggle with, is actually people think that the rights of trans people have got better over time, when actually they've got a lot worse. And as the data shows, in the UK, we've only hit 14.25 of the 30 indicators that are needed to make sure that people are protected in the UK. You know, and also people have to be diagnosed by law to be protected as a transsexual in this country. So without a diagnosis, you're not actually fitting under the trans umbrella and you don't have the protections, say, for example, that I would have because I have a diagnosis of transsexualism. That was a long process that I had to go through actually at the gender identity clinic. And that process generally takes around 3 years to complete. But now there's a massive wait times just to be seen by someone at the gender identity clinics, which has a massive impact on those people waiting, which therefore means their mental health is suffering, they're suffering as a person, and they don't feel comfortable in their skin. When I first went to the gender identity clinic in 2011, the waiting lists were only 6 months. The waiting list now are 4 years just to get a first appointment with somebody. And even on that first appointment, you don't receive any medication and you don't get any help. It's more forms of counselling and psychotherapy before you get given hormones. Also, you have to have lived as your required gender for two or more years to obtain a gender recognition certificate. So I hold a gender recognition certificate, and what that means is it generally gives you the rights as your required gender. So for me, I have the legal rights as a female and all of the same rights as any female would. And when you obtain a gender recognition certificate, what that does is it actually issues you with a new birth certificate, which means that when you have a birth certificate, it has female on it, it has your new name on it, and then you can use that document to then go and get your passport and other documents such as your driving license changed. And you're also seen as that person in law. Also, I wanted to look at the US as well, because when I'm looking to the USA and we compare the USA to the UK, it's really interesting actually, because 1.6 billion people in the US identify as trans. However, when we look at the census in the UK and we compare that to the census they had in the US, 39% of respondents in the US are trans women, 36% are trans men, and only 25% are non-binary. So as you can see, there's a massive difference in the amounts of trans people and how they identify. And I think that that might have something to do with the healthcare system in the US, because obviously to be a trans person, you need to pay for that. And it's a costly process, you know, you need to buy hormones, you need to be on those for life, you need to have surgeries and obviously make yourself feel comfortable and start all over again, basically. So it's a massive change. And if you actually look at the numbers, with 60% of non-binary individuals in the UK, only comparing to 25% in the US, is a massive difference. You know, that's less than a third. So that's something that I really am interested at looking on further and figuring out, okay, how many trans people are there and how can we try and collaborate more, work more closely together? Also, there was a survey by Statistica in 2022 across 27 countries, and it said that approximately 2% of all respondents that were asked in this questionnaire and survey identified as trans. But there was countries such as Germany and Sweden that had a slightly higher percentage at 3% of the general population identified as trans or non-binary. So here we have some issues, some more of the trans rights issues that we have in the UK. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we have massive waiting lists to see a specialist at gender identity clinic. At the moment in the UK, we have 4 gender identity clinics, one based in London, one based in Manchester, one based in Leeds, and I think we've got one down in Bournemouth, able to see people on the NHS. Unfortunately, where the waiting lists are so long, so many people are now forced into seeking private healthcare and support privately, which is a lot more money actually for the individual to have to go through to get that support. And obviously to ensure that the person is supported along the process, because it's not an easy process, as you can imagine, having to change your gender and all of your social aspects of your life, they change. Not all of your family members might be accepting of the fact that you're trans or even understand what it really means. So I think, you know, all of these issues need to be taken into account. There is a lot of research to show that over 50% of trans people are estranged from family members. So a lot of family members disown people that identify as trans. They don't really accept it. And some people see it as an embarrassment and a shame, even today. Also in the UK, we've had a 4,000% rise in natal females seeking treatment since 2015. That's a ratio of 3 trans men to every 1 trans woman that's now transitioning. Prior to 2015, it was the other way around. So before 2015, there was 3 times as many trans women transitioning than there are trans men. So you can see this massive shift in society, in acceptance, in education, and the fact that now more natal females are seeking help to transition and to change their gender. Also here in the UK, we have no ban on conversion therapy, which again, a lot of people have been campaigning on, trying to stop. It's quite an invasive and abusive kind of therapy that can use this kind of electroconvulsion to try and change people's minds, to try and make them believe that they're not trans. And again, I think this is a rather outdated form of therapy that is kind of barbaric and brutal that some trans people have to face, even today, I'm afraid, in this country. There's also been a massive restructuring of the children's gender identity clinics. due to demand, but not just due to demand, due to the CAS report that just came out, I think 2 weeks ago, looking at some of the issues that trans children face when accessing services or trying to get support when they feel that they don't necessarily fit into the body that they were born in. There's been a lot of controversy around trans children transitioning, and also the fact that some of these children really do need support and help and understanding. And if the NHS is unable to provide that service, then again, parents are having to find ways of supporting their children and having to go privately sometimes to ensure that their children are seen, they're heard, and their demands are met. Also, the medical costs of transitions at the moment have really, really soared due to demand. When I started my transition 2011 now, the prices of some surgeries were £2,000 to £3,000, depending on what you wanted. Now that's doubled, I would say, in costs, some to do with the cost of living crisis, but also to do with the increased demand of people accessing services for transgender recorrective surgeries, or to make sure that they feel that they are in the right body and they feel comfortable and able to contribute to society. We've also got to take into account the fact that we have to pay for hormones, medical costs. Sometimes we need to take time off. And then that sometimes when, especially in music and entertainment, when it's a very image-based industry, if you don't feel that you're comfortable in your image and your look and it doesn't match, then sometimes that might hinder people from going up on stage, from feeling comfortable, being able to participate in photo shoots, interviews, etc., if they don't feel that they are looking the way they want to look, and it takes time. And I think, you know, even for me now as a trans woman, I think my transition never stops. It's a continual process. I think it will always continue. It's something that I always think that I'll be working on, because I feel that it's something that is never ending, and it's a process and it takes time, and it isn't an overnight process either. So helping other people to understand that too, and to be able to support other people. And if someone does disclose to you that they want to transition or that they are thinking of transitioning, it's really, really important that you respect their privacy. If they have told you something, and that you don't go around talking about other people's issues and business, because I think it's extremely important that that person has trusted you, and they have faith in you. So maybe they've come to you and they've spoken to you about something that they've not spoken to anyone else about, and they can trust you and confide in you. So don't break their trust, and try and support them and help them along the way if you know anyone, because that's really, really important. I also think that in the UK music and entertainment industry, that we have a lack of visible role models and inspiration. So again, we are a small community. We're only about 1% of the general population, but it's extremely difficult to look around and to see inspiration and, you know, role models that you can look up to or aspire to be like. Yes, we are making strides. We are making progress. It is slow. I know that, and we have to be patient. But at the same time, it is harder when you can't see yourself in an environment, and then you strive to be like something, but you can't see it. So I think when you can see something, you can believe in it, you can see it, and you can aim for it. And I think that will really help the next generation of talent coming into the industry, to help them feel included, to feel safe, to feel heard, and to feel welcome. So I think this is a really massive part of our process of educating, having more inspiration and more visible role models. I think there's also a massive lack of data sets, education and research in music and entertainment. So looking at a lot of the surveys that we've had done recently from 2022 to 2024, which I'll look at on a separate slide later on, we can see that some of these surveys have missed out the trans data, and they haven't collected any data on trans individuals, but they have collected data on non-binary individuals. So when I've asked about this actually several times, is I'm generally told that there's an issue with data collection on the issue of being trans, if you're a trans man or a trans woman, which I totally understand and I accept. However, I do think that we could have an opt-in or opt-out question where you can tick a box if you choose to. So that means that some people might want to disclose they are trans for certain issues, or for certain parts of research, which I think would be really, really useful to help us to gain a better understanding of where we are right now in the music industry, because there is nothing to measure right now. We don't really have many measurable facts or data that we can go on, and then we can't really go back and compare that. So until we do have some data sets and more research, then we'll be able to go back and compare that and say, actually, we have improved, we are making progress. Because at this moment in time, even if we are making progress, there's nothing to measure. So we don't know how much progress we're making or if we're going in the right direction. Also, I wanted to touch on the fact that 321 trans murders happened in 2023. And out of that, 94% of those were trans women or identified as trans feminine. So again, it really shows that trans women actually are at a massive disadvantage to being attacked, to having abuse, and to also just being disrespected in any kind of society. To be honest with you, it has been difficult, and hate crime has also increased by 65% in the last 3 years to 2023 against trans people. So if we look at the data that we had from Gallup, actually, over the last 5 years for trans individuals, hate crime has risen by 186%. So that's a massive amount. I think the problem that we do have is when we have more visibility and representation, that also comes with people that don't understand, that are not as accepting, and that some people that will never accept the fact that there are trans people and that trans people have rights. So again, this is something that I think is important to highlight, is even in day-to-day life, trans people have to go through so much. It's not easy. And just being nice and kind to people and allowing them to speak and allowing them to share some of their experiences with you is extremely important. And if you do see any kind of forms of harassment, discrimination, or bullying, then please make sure you do report that. We have a creative independence standards authority called CISA, who's able to take on board any forms of discrimination, harassment, or bullying. And I would recommend that if anyone does see anything, then please do report that. Also, trans and disabled people are less likely to get legal prosecutions, unfortunately, when they do report hate crimes, most of which are violent or threats of violence, which again goes to show that trans and disabled people are generally taken less seriously, are generally not treated as equally or as fairly as other forms of people in society. And again, we've also got a lot of people speaking out against trans people. So J.K. Rowling, Liz Truss, Suella Braverman, Boris Johnson, several people in high profile positions have a view on trans people, which again, I can understand that not everyone is going to accept trans people. But what people do not realize is that there are real people out there in the world today that have to live, and we have to get by. And unfortunately, sometimes the hate and the divisiveness can make it a lot more difficult for people like myself to just get on in society and be accepted and feel welcome, because it stirs up fear, and I think it divides people rather than bringing people together. And what I always try and do as a trans woman, I know it's really difficult, but I'm always out there trying to build allies. I'm trying to help other communities, and I'm also trying to educate other people on some of these issues and barriers, because I believe the more people understand some of the issues and the barriers that we face, the more likely that they are to be able to support us and also understand how we feel and what we go through in life. Because, I think being a trans woman is the hardest thing I've ever done. Even working in this music industry and doing what I do, that's hard. But I think, once you've gone through something like that, it's life-changing. And it takes time. It's not an easy process. But I'm so, so proud. And I just want anyone to know that if you are feeling that you might need any help or support, then please go and see your doctor or your GP, discuss it with them and get a referral. Or if not, if you just want to have a chat, you can either speak to myself or you can speak to Josh, who's going to be on the end of the call. Always here to help. And if anyone needs any advice, then please do, just get in touch. So here we're going to have a look at the trans rights map. So this is the trans rights map from 2023. So this lays out 54 different countries, and 49 of those are in Europe, and the other 5 are in South Asia. So what this does is show country-specific requirements, and it illustrates the legal situation across them and compares the differences. Now, the reason I put this up is actually I thought this is a really good one to have for people that might be interested in touring, on doing music abroad, internationally, is that actually when you're a trans person, we can't travel everywhere. There's certain countries that are just no-go areas for us, I'm afraid. Even in today's society, there's not everywhere that accepts trans people, and there are some quite hostile places, even in Europe, for trans and non-binary individuals. So here we have a map showing some of the best countries. So at the top of the map, we've got Denmark, we've got Malta actually at 89%, which actually gives us a really good insight to their rights that they have, what legal recognitions they have, what protections you have for non-binary people, what protections you have for asylum seekers, and how you treat people in the healthcare system. So all of these things are added up on a points-based system, and it gives you a percentage on each country. So the first on the top of the list, like I said, was Malta, followed by Denmark and Belgium at 76%. Spain is at 74%, Iceland at 71%. Finland is just gone up actually this year because they've now introduced a recognition for non-binary people along with Germany. So they've now gone up to 71%. We've got Luxembourg and Sweden that are really good at supporting trans and non-binary individuals. Norway, France, Portugal. There's lots of European countries here that are way better than UK, Germany even, but as you're starting to look at some of the places, for example, like Italy, Serbia, Hungary, Slovenia, Austria, these places are a little less accepting for trans and non-binary individuals. So that's really, really interesting to know, actually. So if I was to do a tour, if I wanted to do some work in a different country, I would look at this map and it would be able to tell me, okay, how would I be accepted? How would my rights be affected? How would I be treated in each one of these countries? And it's a really good way of assessing what countries are accepting for trans and non-binary individuals and what are not. So, some of the worst ones we have, I think, on there is Belarus and Poland, really, really bad. So, and even Turkey, as we know, we've heard some horrific things about some of these countries. I know there was a trans woman in Turkey a couple of years ago doing a protest actually for trans rights, and she got burnt to death, unfortunately. She got tortured and burnt to death just for sticking up for her rights. So not every country accepts the fact that we're trans or even has a policy to protect trans people. But as you can see on this map, there are some really, really good countries out there that are very, very supportive. But I just thought it was really shocking actually to actually compare the UK to Ireland even. Ireland is actually better than the UK for trans rights, even though they're Catholic and they're very religious. So, even Spain, I looked at this, and Portugal, and I was thinking, actually, this is really, really interesting because they're quite Catholic countries and they're very religious. However, they seem to be more accepting than what we are in the UK, and we're not so religious. So, I find this really, really interesting, and it's really, really good to be aware of some of these countries and what your rights are and where you might be able to travel and how safe you would be. So I thought that was really, really important. So now we're going to look at the transgender workforce. And here in the UK, the music industry has been making strides to make the industry more inclusive. And here is what we know so far. The data is low and it's not always accurate, unfortunately, because of the way we ask the question and how people answer the question. So I think we have to be really careful here when we're looking at data to say, yes, we do have some great data here, but how accurate is that data? And we have to make sure that we're asking the right questions in the right ways and we're asking people at the right age as well. So I think that's really, really important. But in 2018, 78% of trans people in the UK music industry reported that they had suffered discrimination since being in the music and entertainment industry. 78% is extremely high, actually. I think that's like one in. So that's like 4 out of 5, isn't it? 4 out of 5 people have experienced discrimination who are trans and non-binary in the music industry, and ever since then, I think we've only just had a new census in 2023 looking at some of the issues around LGBT acceptance and discrimination. And that also found that over 60% of people had experienced harassment, bullying, or discrimination. However, very, very few of them reported that, which again is something that needs to be looked at. And why are people not reporting some of these issues? I think sometimes it's a fear of speaking out. I think sometimes it's not knowing where to go to report some of these issues. And sometimes if you're by yourself and some of these issues have occurred, you're feeling that, okay, this issue's occurred, but I'm by myself, so there's nothing I can really do about it. And I think this is something that we do need to address. 70% of the workforce in the UK is freelance. So again, by being freelance, you're not actually protected by law under some of these equality, for example, under the Equalities Act, if you're not employed by an employer and you're self-employed. So I think this is another thing that needs to be looked at when looking at the music industry, is a massive part of our workforce is actually freelance. And how can we make sure that these freelance people are protected, their rights are protected, and they are seen as valuable and equal to everybody else, you know? And in 2018, 1% of people surveyed answered other, and this increased to 2% of the workforce. So in 2018, only 1% of our workforce, it was asked male, female, or other. So again, this isn't a really accurate picture, but it does say around 1% of people identified as other than male or female, which not always would be trans men and trans women, because I would probably take the female box if I'm honest. So again, we need to figure out, okay, what is the amount of people that are actually working in the workforce at this moment in time? And according to the data that I could find, is since 2018 to 2023, we've only gone up by 1%, 1 percentage point in having a diverse workforce that's not other than male and female. So I know this question is not a great one to have asked, because it does tend to other people. And I think this is another thing. We don't really want to be seen as othered. I think it would be really, really useful to have specific questions, asking a specific, ticking a specific box with a specific question to it, which helps people to understand easier. And it also collects data that's more accurate, So I think there's some more work to be done here on figuring out what our workforce actually is and the size of that workforce. However, in Europe, there has been some great work done on how diverse their workforce is. So I can't really see that one, but I think it's around, let me see. Yeah. So 64% were men. So in the workforce, it was more diverse. So 64% were men, 32% were women, and 6% were other in 2021. So obviously, compared to our 1 or 2%, the European workforce is 3 times bigger than ours and 3 times more diverse than ours. So, it's just interesting to see when you're comparing those stats and those figures on actually we're behind the EU on being inclusive, on being diverse and representative of people that do not generally identify as male or female. Also, we're seeing that more diversity across festivals. So in 2018, 20% were female, 70% were male, 70% were mixed with both male and female performers, and 3% were non-binary. This has improved. So in 2023, 30% were females, so that gone up by 10%. Males had dropped by 13% to 57%. Mixed had stayed the same at 7%, and non-binary had actually gone up to 6%. So if you can actually see that they are making strides in the European workforce to make sure that the workforce is representative of people that are different, that it's also making sure that we are measuring and we are collecting data to ensure that we can measure where we're at now and what progress we're making in the future. I think that's really, really important. And also I looked at the amount of gender recognition certificates that have been issued, and they've remained steady actually. So even though we've had a massive increase in people identifying as trans, I think, it takes a couple of years anyway for them to be able to apply for a certificate, because you have to legally be living as that gender for 2 years. And once you do sign a gender recognition certificate, you are basically saying you're staying as that gender for the rest of your life. That's your required gender, and you are issued with a new certificate. But you have to go to a court and you have to collect documents over that 2-year period to prove that you've lived as that person, and also some letters from your GP and from someone from the gender clinic. Slide. So here we're going to have a look at some transgender venues. So I've tried to cover a few venues here, not just in London, but in Liverpool and in Manchester. to help give people a little bit of an idea of what some of the venues are and what's available to trans people, around the UK at the moment. And as you're all aware, there's been a massive cost of living crisis, and there's been a lot of closures, a lot of venue closures, and a lot of closures actually across the LGBT venues in London and across the UK. So I think it's really, really important to highlight some of these venues that are doing great work to support trans artists, to make sure that the trans community is catered for and that people are able to feel welcome and, have a sense of community. Because I think, being a trans person, it can be isolating at times. And it's also about having a shared experience and being able to meet new people that are going through the same thing as you and being able to find new friends. So we have the Dalston Superstore, which is literally 5 minutes away from me, which is in Kingsland Road in Dalston, which is actually a great venue. They put on trans nights, drag nights, gay nights, lesbian nights. They have performances, they have DJ nights, but they also have nights where up and coming performers can go along. They can perform their tracks and their music, which I think is great. And it's able to build a sense of confidence among those artists as well, and an infrastructure that the trans and non-binary people can use to actually help progress their career. We've got the New Union in Manchester, along with Canal Street, which is fantastic. So this is a range of different venues along Canal Street and the New Union in Manchester, which helps provide a venue for trans and non-binary people and their admirers to go to have a good night, to meet new people, and to also cater to the community up in Manchester. So if you're up in Manchester anytime and you want to go out, please do check them out. One of my favorites is actually Bombshell. So that was in Soho. Sorry, that was in Soho, and it's been around for many, many years. I remember it was probably the first place I went out to when I first transitioned, actually. And I met loads and loads of people there. They do have a lot of drag queens that are well known, that have been on RuPaul's Drag Race, that actually work there. And yeah, I just found it a really nice place to meet other trans women, other trans men. And yeah, it was a great way to meet new people in London. We also have the Way Out Club, run by the amazing Vicky Lee. She's just now moved up to East London next to, I think it's called the Swan, which is in next to the Troxy. So that's just moved up there. And that's another night once a week for trans people to go along to in London. This one is. And they can go and meet their friends. They can also meet admirers, and they can just build a sense of community and yeah, have a good time. We've also got the Masquerade in Liverpool. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but it's a fantastic LGBT venue that caters for not just trans people, but for lesbian, gay, bi, and trans. They have great nights on. So they have nights where you can go and perform. You can go and see drag acts, and you can go and see trans people performing. And you can also go there as an up-and-coming artist and perform your new tracks and try and get some more exposure. So I think it's really, really useful to have some of these amazing venues, not just in London, but around the country, that, aspiring artists can go to, perform, and build a good fan base that's from their tribe. We've also got Fire in London, which is a fantastic venue in Vauxhall. I've been there a few times. It's massive, it's really, really good, and it's very accepting. It's an LGBT venue. They're very, very well trained on trans and non-binary issues. All of their staff are great. They're very accepting, and they play a range of different kinds of music. So I think they have different nights during the week, different styles of music, different genres of music. And then they also have a special trans night and an LGBT nights as well. So if any of you are interested, please do check them out. So now I want to talk about something that I've been thinking about for a while now, and it's called the Trans Charter for the creative industries. I feel that we needed something to kind of help set out directive and priorities, as well as provide strategies for organizations, businesses, creative hubs, artists, anyone that's working in the music industry, who can choose to adopt good practice across the creative sector. So I didn't want it just to be for the music industry. This can be open for anyone in the creative industries actually to sign up to. And this would help, people both on and off set, and it will help it will keep the music industry equal, inclusive, and diverse. And it will also provide a framework on addressing systematic failings that are currently taking place for the trans community across music and entertainment and the creative sector. Because as we know, the creative sector brings in billions of pounds to the UK economy, and it's a really important sector. And I know personally that I'm not really an academic, I'm a creative. And I know so many people that are creatives. And, just by having something to protect trans and non-binary individuals, especially, we're extremely creative people, in an industry that we want to come into to feel safe, to feel protected, and to feel respected and safeguarded. Because I think this is part of the problem we have, is if there are so many freelance people, there is no protection for anyone. And this is an optional thing. So it's not compulsory. We're not telling people what to do. We're only asking people if they would be interested in signing up to sign a charter that would help protect those rights. And then every 1 year we can go along and just make sure that the training's in place, that there's areas of improvement, there's representation, there's data collection, as well as being able to have a main reporting system. Because like we said already, CISA are being able to deal with stuff, but if there's one main reporting system that we can measure and we can figure out what's going on, and also figure out if there are any bad apples, that are discriminating against trans people, because they need to be called out. And I think sometimes this is a problem that we do have, is I think there is complacency that people are not going to speak out and that people can do as they please. And I think we do need something to ensure that people are safe, that they are respected. But also, if people wish to sign up to this, it's a great way of being able to show others that they are inclusive and they're representative and they're accepting. So what would the Trans Charter actually cover? The Trans Charter would cover legal protections to ensure that we are seen, we're heard, and we're protected by law when we're at work or when we're in the music and entertainment or anywhere in the creative sector, actually. It would help by addressing harassment, discrimination, and trans misogyny, which is something that I find that we do have an issue with, actually, is trans misogyny in the music industry. As a trans woman, I have come across this several times. And not always from men, and sometimes from women. So it's mixed. And not everyone does see trans women as women, and not everyone sees trans men as men. So this is something that we do need to look at, and we do need to address it, because as we know, there's an endemic of misogyny in the music industry. So if there's an endemic of misogyny for women, could you imagine what it's like for trans women? And this is something that I really have to navigate in this industry. And this is another reason why I wanted to bring Josh on the call at the end, is because for me as a trans woman, I think that I'd experienced trans misogyny quite often, actually, in the industry. And it's a bit of a shame, because you're trying to progress, you're trying to move on, you're trying to get somewhere in life. And sometimes these are unnecessary barriers preventing you from succeeding or preventing people from supporting you, actually. And I think that's something that I have struggled with. And I would like to see that addressed if possible. Also, to have equal access to services and funding. And what I mean by services and funding is to make sure that people who are diagnosed as trans are able to access funding, are able to access the right services that they require in order to proceed and progress in the industry. Because, as some of the things I've mentioned already, is we're facing so many barriers already. It's extremely difficult for us to succeed and to get funding and to get money, actually. And without the backing of people and support of people, we wouldn't be here. We can't do things for free. We can't progress. We can't succeed. So if we can try and get equal access to services and funding, and ensure that funding models are able to understand what it is to be trans, what trans rights are, what it actually, and I think another thing for me is, I totally understand that people are asked a question, but there's no checks and balances. So for me at the moment, I think anyone could just tick a box and say that they were trans. And would anyone even check? Is there any way of checking? Is there any way of safeguarding that funding to make sure it is going in the right places? Because I have seen times when people are able to access funding, and if I'm trying to access funding, I can't access. So again, it's having an impact on people that really do need it. And again, it would really be useful for my community to be able to access those funds equally and fairly. And also to have education and training and awareness on a regular basis, actually. For that's not just for venues, that's for people working in the industry, organizations, employees, anyone that would be interested in taking part. Then yeah, I think it's really, really important to have training around these issues, to make sure people are aware of them, what some of the issues are, and how people can support people like myself into employment, into the workplace, to feel safe and to progress. And also, I would like to address the representation and empowerment piece. So by having a chart like this, it would employ other trans people to go out there and support and teach and educate, as well as myself, other people on some of these issues and barriers, and also to be that sense of representation for the community and to empower the next generation, and to also make them feel welcome, seen, heard, and I think that would be really beneficial for our talent pipeline, because at the moment I feel a lot of the people that I see, when I compare fashion to TV, to the music industry, a lot of the students are a lot more diverse in fashion and TV than they are in the music industry. And I still can't understand why that is. So that's something that I think we could address by having more representation and empowerment for the younger generations. So intersectionality is another really important one that I thought I'd touch on. Sorry, I'm talking so much today. It's coined by Kimberly Renshaw in the 80s, and intersectionality emphasized the importance of considering multiple dimensions of identity and oppression when analyzing social issues and advocating for social justice. So, I'm a multiracial trans woman. I suffer from dyslexia, and I also have some mental health issues that I have to deal with, so that puts me at different barriers, and it makes it a little bit harder for me than it would for some other people to succeed in the industry. So, I think being multiracial is one thing, then having a disability is another thing. And then obviously, if you're coming from a low class background, they're all barriers to success. They're all barriers to progression. And as trans people, we're often intersectional. We often suffer from more than one thing. And I think this is another really important part that we need to touch on is, advocating for social justice, and also making sure that we address inequalities and discrimination, because intersectionality, it's like a multiplier effect. So, for example, you might be disabled and then you might be trans and then you might come from a low class background. So that's multiplied your difficulties by 3 compared to someone who might just be a middle class cis person living at home. They might not have any of these issues. So again, it's about understanding what they are. How can we support people, and how can we make sure that people are able to succeed in this music and entertainment industry? It's also recognizing that transgender individuals may also face discrimination or marginalization based on their race, their ethnicity, socioeconomic status, disability, or any other identities, because at the same time, it's important that an intersectional approach is taken to address the complex and interconnected nature of discrimination and to create an inclusive and equitable environment for everybody. And I think, we can do that. This industry is fabulous. We've got some amazing people in it. We just need to work more closely together on finding some solutions on how we can actually make it equal, equitable, and fair, so we're not losing talent. So we are ensuring that we are diverse, we're representative, and we represent the communities in which we live. So marginalization is another topic that I thought I would touch on, because I've often felt marginalized at times. Even now, people might look at me and think, yes, Ash, you're great and you're doing really well. But there are issues at times that I feel that, as a trans woman, I don't always feel included. I sometimes do feel left out. I do feel that there are biases. I do feel that, we're getting there, but we've still got a long way to go. So by, looking at marginalization and what it actually means, it's where certain groups get denied access to areas of society, and those factors can lead to access to institutions or opportunities. There's historical bias, a lack of funding, and also belonging to one particular group often means that you might be more marginalized than others, so that can also be down to ethnicity, down to your gender, down to your disability and your social economic status. So we've got economic marginalization, which refers to the disparities in amassing wealth or getting a job. For example, many forms of employment marginalize racial minorities due to harmful stereotypes on what types of people make good managers or workers. We've also got political marginalization, where communities struggle to participate in parts of civic processes like voting or gaining access to their political representatives. You know, if you look at Jim Crow and the era laws that prevented Black Americans from voting, where they were examples of political marginalization. And then we've also got social marginalization. So social marginalization is where someone can't participate in everyday leisure issues. And it is known as social marginalization because it denies the access to clubs or organizations, you know, and it doesn't make the person feel that they're part of something or have that sense of belonging. So I think, you know, just even by doing these talks today, it gives people a sense of belonging. It makes people feel heard. It makes them feel part of something. And I think sometimes, so often in the trans community, we are often marginalized and left on the sideline and just hoped that, you know, we'll just get on and progress. And I just would like to see more done on this to ensure that people are not marginalized, because marginalization harms people and it is a burden and it makes people, you know, it makes people feel down, has some effects on their mental health. It can also limit talent pools. So, you know, if we're going to marginalize people, people might not feel welcome or accepted. They're just going to go away. And again, we're going to lose talent. We're going to lose, you know, amazing people if we treat people that way. And it's not fair. And it's not what we should be doing in the UK. You know, we're one of the best countries in the world. I think we could be doing more. It also increases criminal activity among people that do suffer from marginalization. They're left without little funds, they're left without money, they're left without a job, they're often unable to participate, you know, economically. So they're left with little choices. And then again, that feeling of worthlessness, of not being good enough, of constantly trying and trying and trying and not getting anywhere and going around in circles, that again can cause mental health issues. That again can make the person not feel they're good enough. It can make a person feel that they're not welcome. And you know, I get the music industry, it's one of those industries you've got to work hard, you've got to keep going and not give up. But the thing is, for trans and non-binary people, is I think where we go through so much already is that the industry needs to understand that and be a little bit more supportive on some of these areas to ensure that we're not losing some of this amazing talent that we do have. Because if we do marginalize people, then it has a knock-on effect. It limits our talent. It limits how many people can achieve, and it doesn't look good on, you know, our economic status, on how much we can achieve and where we can go. Because as we all know, the more diverse our workforce is, the more productive it is, and the better ideas we come up with. So I think it's a really good idea.
Sorry, Saskia, I'm just going to quickly jump in. I know we've hit 1 o'clock, but we'll happily run over because obviously this is really, really important.
Okay.
So just to say to anyone, if you do need to leave, the full recording will be put up on our website so you can watch back the rest of the session. Sorry,
I
Saskia, carry on.
didn't even see the time. Thank you, Gabby. I'm sorry
No,
about that.
no
So yeah,
problem.
we've got some amazing organisations here as well I thought I would highlight. So we've got GLAD, which is a non-profit LGBT advocacy organisation based in the US. And it's formed as a protest actually for the lack of gay, lesbian and trans coverage and portrayals across the music industry. We don't have one of those in the UK as yet, but you never know, we might have one in the future. And it'd be really good to have a look at what they're doing and see if there's something that we could do like that over here in the UK, because I think it's extremely important. I remember I was doing a talk last year, and I remember in 2018, actually, there was a complete lack of lesbian or gay role models in the music industry. We really had, we had very many, we didn't have very many. So since GLAD has come along, we've actually increased that, and they're actually doing some amazing work. There's also Gender Intelligence, which is a gender identity research and educational society. They're a charity that collects and research and data and helps educate others on trans rights and non-binary issues, and they're based in the UK. We've also got Trans Inspire, which helps provide books, educational resources, support, and inspiration for trans and non-binary individuals. We've got Press for Change, which is a great organisation based in London. It helps with transgender law, with media coverage, any issues that people might have If someone's writing a bad story about a trans individual, or if someone wants to report an issue around something that's been written on trans issues, then you can report that to the Press for Change. And then we've got the amazing F List, which is an amazing organization that helps trans and gender diverse people, as well as women in the music industry. It has a directory of artists, over 6,000 artists you can sign up to, you can collaborate with. We do research hours, we do collaborations, we do funding opportunities, and we also do networking events. So please feel free to sign up to the F List, and that we are based in the UK. And we also have the Transgender Advocacy Group, which helps to advocate for trans non-binary individuals across governments to make sure that we are heard, we're seen, and some of our rights are protected. So collaboration and allyship, I thought, is really, really important as well. To touch on this one, I've already touched on it a little bit, but I'll say it again. It's really, really important that people do collaborate, that they do reach out, that they do support one another. I think, you know, a lot of talk's been mentioned on the trans community, but I would also like to say to other trans individuals is let us reach out to other communities, let us work with other communities as well, collaborate, you know, information share, support one another, and, you know, build that sense of community and belonging. Because I think, you know, the most important thing about collaboration is it helps people to work together and achieve a common goal or objective. And it also makes sure that people can share ideas and resources, as well as have a mutually beneficial outcome. So I think it's really, really important. And again, allyship is about solidarity with marginalized and oppressed groups, making sure that people feel seen and heard, that they feel supported. And Live have done a great job of being an amazing ally for the trans community. And they've done some great collaborations with all the underrepresented groups. And I'm so pleased at the work that they're all doing. So, you know, if everyone could just copy the work that Live's doing on being so supportive and understanding and accepting, that would be absolutely fantastic. So please do. And, you know, if you ever need somebody, please do reach out to myself or to Gabby at Live, and we can always help you if you need some support. And make sure you love one another and support each other along the way. This music industry can be brutal, it can be difficult, it can be challenging, but, you know, we've got some amazing people in this industry. We've just got to find them and, you know, treat each other with respect, with dignity, you know, and I think that's the best way forward for us, for all of us. Yeah, and we've just got a few more things to touch on now. We're nearly at the end, so thank you for your patience. So here's some of the problems that we do have in the UK music industry: is that recognition, is that allyship, and the collaboration. So if we look at the UK Diversity Report in 2022, there was no data on trans and non-binary. Well, there was on non-binary, but no trans data on there, so we couldn't collect any of that. There wasn't any data on the UK Music Privileges Roundtable, so I couldn't collect any data on that. The Unseen Unheard Report 2023 did check it, but there wasn't anything on there for trans individuals. But however, they have just brought out a new one at the moment: harassment, bullying, and discrimination report. I'm very pleased to announce that trans and non-binary issues was placed in that one. So that was really, really good. There is a lack of research and data sets, but I'm hoping in the near future we do start to collect more. And I know Charisse at Black Lives in Music has been doing some great work around this. I know that she's also going to be doing some work on diversity at live music events. So that'll be really interesting to look at. We've got a talent pipeline issue, looking at the younger generations and who's coming through the music industry. It's still very cis-dominated, I'm afraid. It's still not as diverse as it should be. We still need to see more underrepresented groups coming into the music industry. And I know we have some great organizations that are looking on doing that. So Black Lives in Music have been doing some fantastic work on that. And I just hope that continues. We need funding for trans people that are diagnosed, as well as opportunities and supporting infrastructure for people like artists that want to make it in this industry, that need that promotion, that need an agent, that need a booker, you know, all of these kind of things. We need those kind of infrastructures in place to support us to the next steps, and also to have our rights and protections recognised across the creative sectors in the UK. So finally, the community bit. So here we go. I do a podcast called Music Industry Insights Worldwide that has over 52 episodes on there so far, which is a good way of me promoting also my podcast, but also the collaboration part of it. And there's been all sorts of different people on my show from different backgrounds, working in different areas of the music industry, not just here in the UK, but across the world. So if you want to go on there and learn some more about all the different people that I've met and spoken to, feel free to do that. Report abuse, harassment, and discrimination. You can do that to CISA. And if you have got any issues or anything like that, you can always contact Gabby or John at Live or Grace, or you can contact myself and I can put you in touch with Jen, because Jen's fabulous, has been doing some great work around that. And we can collaborate with other underrepresented groups across the music industry, support one another, inspire each other, and just stay amazing. So thank you all so much for your time today. I appreciate everything. And I'm just going to bring up Josh at the end, because we've now got some questions if anyone wants to ask any questions. So Josh is the trans guy. He's on the screen. I can see him down there. And then there's me as well. So we're here to answer any questions that you might have. So thank you very much. Thanks, John. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Saskia. Does anyone have any questions you'd like to ask Saskia or Josh? There's a few lovely words in the chat
I might
throughout.
those. I'll have a look. I'm too busy looking at the screen. Oh, bless. Yeah, 61 months plus. That's terrible. Yeah. Thanks. Oh, that's a pleasure, Rob. No problem. Well, is there any questions? If there's not, then that's fine. I must have done a good job.
You did do an amazing job. Thank you so much, Saskia. There's so
Yeah,
much.
you certainly did. Can I
Thank you.
just jump in, Gabby? Is that okay? Cool. Thank you. I think Saskia, first of all, you are always welcome here. You are always seen and you are always heard.
Thank you.
So thanks again for another really informative session. I was going to ask, as an ally, what can Live do as the next step in our allyship? But I think you answered it in terms of the charter idea.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Where are you up to with it? Have you spoken to other organisations like, Help Musicians, Musicians Union, who I'm sure would be interested? And what can we do to try and sort of help to push you forward?
Thank you very much. Well, I thought, this would be the first place where I've announced. People do know that I was going to do this, but this is the first place where I've announced it. Sorry, publicly. So yeah, if we can do some work on collaborating with other organisations and trying to get other people on board to sign up to this, and if Live could support that as well, that'd be absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, John. And that's something I'm really keen on doing, is maybe by the end of the year getting this rolled out. I've spoken to the F list and they're really supportive. Key Change will be supportive. I think there's some great organisations that would love to support this. It's just literally getting it off the ground.
Okay, well, you got Grace there, who's a superstar at
Grace,
organising meetings and helping things to sort of move along. So the support there, just tell us what you need.
Thank you so much, John.